I don't know who managed it. Oxford University and other universities manage it. So I presume the data is credible, hopefully. Anyway, according to their graph, which we'll see in a minute, well, no, yeah, but it was about 200,000 years since first humans walked on the planet. 200,000 years, so that's quite a long time, and it's time enough for those humans to have gone through at least one ice age. And the last ice age finished about 12,000 years ago, didn't it? So at that time, at the time of the end of the last ice age, say 10,000 years ago, the world population is estimated to be about 4 million people, 4 million humans. So that we go to our first graph. So there we are. This is over the long run. So we'll spend a bit of time on this because this is quite fun. So 10,000 years ago, about 4 million. And by the time we get up to the birth of Christ, where it says naught, it's 190 million. And the average growth rate over that period was about 0.04% a year. So very slow growth. And that continued for a little bit. There's a little dip there where Black Death took a bit of a toll. This is down to, I should have a pointer. Can you see my pointer?
Yes.
You can, okay, that's all right. So yeah, so that killed off rather a few. By 1700, we got to 600 million. And then the first billion came up just after 1800. So all that period, all 200,000 years, we finally got up to 1 billion. But then, as you can see from this graph, something rather strange happened. The population increased exponentially and went on doing so for quite a while. It won't continue to do so, as we'll see in a minute, but there's an extraordinary change takes place around about 1800, 1820, somewhere around about there. And if we think about life in the flat bit of the graph, most people lived off their own production. Only a few products and services were bought and sold in the market. Living standards remained poor by many metrics. Life expectancy fluctuated up and down at around 40 years, 30 to 40 years, without a trend. Access to education and literacy were poor. Child deaths were very common, and the food supply remained extremely poor during these centuries. So, you know, I have got the famous quote from Thomas Hobbes, which is I think it's slightly exaggerated, but he says, life was no arts, no letters, no society, and which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death, and the life of man, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. He was writing that in the middle of the English Civil War, so you know it wasn't a very good time to, you know, it wasn't a very hopeful time maybe. Although he did write a very interesting book on what he thought we should do in England to deal with that situation, which was to have a sovereign, which ensured that the laws were obeyed and it was orderly, and then we had a commonwealth where everything was shared. So you know, you could think about that. Anyway, this is about population. Yes, indeed. And I thought that would please Steve.
Shall we? I'll just put on.
So before we leave this slide, any questions, comments, anything anybody wants to say about it?
Well, can I, Stephen?
Yeah, of course.
Well, he does seem to have written off, they've written off, you know, the civilizations of Rome and Greece and Egypt. Hobbes saying there were no life of arts.
Yes, but yeah, I threw Hobbes in as a bit of a joke, so don't worry about it. too much space. Yeah, but I think in the Roman Empire, probably for most, we're talking about most people, right? There was a small minority who lived much better than that. But yeah, Rome was a slave society. I doubt you'd have liked living in it. Yeah. And any other? Is this what you thought world population growth was like?
Mm.
May I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Does
Anybody can.
oh, does that graph mirror it's called the hockey stick graph, I think,
Yes,
climate change and CO2 emissions.
indeed.
Are we talking about the beginning of the Industrial Revolution?
Yes, amongst other things. And you will see the hockey stick shape in lots of other graphs. So that's why I started with this one.
Right, thank you.
But well done for introducing that idea. This is a particularly vicious hockey stick because it's it's got almost a right angle bend, but that, of course, that depends on the scale and so on. But anyway, I think it makes the point that there's something very different. Something happened around about 1800, and it went on happening. That's the other bit. It went on happening for a long time, well, up to now, basically. Well, this goes beyond now because 10 billion is projected for the year 2058. That top one up there. So we're at 8 billion now, roughly. Okay, so there's now quite a lot of us on the planet, about 8 billion. That's 2,000 times more than at the end of the Ice Age. Okie dokie. What else should we do? I think we'll go to the next slide, which is interesting and a bit more reassuring. So this is more recent now. This is since 1700. So we got the same sort of hockey stick. It's not such a violent hockey stick here. It's a bit more gradual. So there we are at 8 billion now. The UN projects it'll get to 9.7 billion in 2050, and then it will peak at 10.4 billion in 2086. And the reason for that is this purple line, which is the annual growth rate of the population, which peaked in 1963 and since then has dropped like a stone. So it's pretty certain that something like this shape will happen because the growth rate, the growth rate's got down to here, so it's less than 1% a year now, and it's probably going to, unless something funny happens, well, who knows? But yeah, but that's probably a pretty good prediction. You're fairly safe in thinking that we'll get to 2086 or around about there, and the world population will peak, and then it will start going down gradually, not rapidly. So I didn't know that. I could have known that, but I didn't know that. So it's quite interesting to see that. Yeah. Okay, and then there's a few other reasons why that is. We've already passed peak child, apparently. So the peak number of children was in about 2020, and since then it's going to go down. Oh dear, somebody ringing. I'll ignore it. And this is another graph just showing the growth predictions, just by themselves. We've already seen that roughly. So that's relatively good news. The world population is not increasing exponentially, which I thought it was. I thought it was going on, totally out of control, but it isn't. So any questions, comments, or amazement at that? Did we know that?
No. What are they basing that prediction on? Is that
The best
wealth or
no, that's just demographics.
status of women? No, but they're predicting.
They are.
And I'm wondering what's giving them that
Well,
belief.
go back to that one. I mean, this is not a prediction, right?
No.
This
Okay,
drop
got
here
that bit.
has happened for various reasons. I mean, the main one we'll come on to in a second.
Okay.
The main one is the decline in child mortality.
Right.
Has also been very significant. But you're right, it's also the position of women. It's yeah, but I think it's mainly decline in infant mortality. So we'll come on to that one. I think, do we know? What's the next one? Look here. Right. Okay. Before we come on to that, well, yes, infant. Well, there isn't a graph. Well, there is a graph, but what's happened? Where are we? Yeah, somewhere. Basically, up till, well, in pre-1800, infant mortality was something like 1 in every 2 children died. And this wasn't a lot better, even in the 20th century. And then round about 1950, it started dropping, significantly, and it's now very low. Infant mortality throughout the world is very low. So people no longer have to have 5 children in order to make sure that 2 live. So that's what's happened basically. If we look at life expectancy, here we have 1850. Almost every country in the world, life expectancy is less than 40 years. This is life expectancy at birth. So even in 1800, the whole world was more or less the same. And if you move to 1950, then there have been some changes. The more developed or wealthier countries have got greatly increased life expectancy, and the countries in the middle of the tropics really haven't, particularly Africa. But then you come on to now, or almost now, and everywhere has seen a big increase in life expectancy. So the global average now is 73 years, which is a huge change from 30 to 40, which it was not all that long ago in some countries. So that's also been a big change, and that contributes to declining birth rate. Parents don't need to have lots of children. Their life expectancy is greater. What else? The world was very unequal in 1950 in terms of life expectancy, because a lot of red countries in the middle there still, and others much better. But now the inequality in life expectancy is much less than it was in 1950. It still isn't as high in lots of African countries as it is in, Australia, Canada, Japan. Japan, I think, has the longest life expectancy of any country in the world, but it's much less unequal than it was in 1950. So that's a difference. That's a significant difference, particularly for the poorer part of the world. I think people often think that nothing much has happened in Africa. It's just there hasn't really been any change there, whereas the rest of us have got better conditions. But that's not the case. Africa hasn't caught up yet, but in terms of life expectancy, it's not that far behind. And if we come to the next slide, which is a different version of the same thing, except that here you've got a very long run data for the UK, because we have very good data for the UK. So you can see from 1500 odd up to, well, 1850, it just went up and down. There were some bad periods and not so bad periods, but it didn't really change. And then it gradually took off. And every other part of the world has followed, even Africa coming up significantly. Something funny happened in Japan round about there. Is that the war? I don't know, but then Japan is now top of the league. So there's been a very significant increase in life expectancy, which changes people's view in terms of, how they need to think about their life and what the prospects are and so on. So that's quite a significant change, I think. Okay. Are we all right on life expectancy? Okey-dokey.
I'm surprised Africa's over
Mhm.
60.
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
Mm.
Well, if the UN data is correct. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good
Yeah,
news.
I didn't know that either.
No.
I mean, that's obviously to do with, improving health conditions even in Africa, and probably better diets and so on. I mean, some things have improved. Yeah.
I would guess that is it a vaccine for malaria that's just,
Well, that's very recent, isn't it?
yeah, that's just come on, like, but
Mm.
that should make I think
that
it's
will have
helped
another.
with children,
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
help.
So yeah.
Yeah, we haven't. I mean, these graphs, you can put whatever countries on you want. I've only put on a few, otherwise it gets totally confusing. But yeah, you can look at individual countries. Yeah, I mean, and what the text that goes with this says that over the last 200 years, people in all countries in the world achieved impressive progress in health that led to increases in life expectancy. Again, that's not something I knew as a definite fact. I thought there'd probably be some places where nothing much had changed, but this is not the case. So, and that's good news, obviously, in some ways, not necessarily in terms of climate emergency, but well, it is. Yes, you don't want people to have short and nasty lives, do you? Increased life expectancy is a good thing for everybody, and we've enjoyed it for longer than most. You can see ours took off, well, just before 1900, really. So that's population size, population growth, reasons why the world population will peak sometime in the not very distant future, and the big increases in life expectancy. So there's only one other slide on this topic, and that's slightly different. It's just a good reminder of where the world's population is. So the size of the country is proportionate to the population.
Oh.
These are, I forget what they call these maps. So something is fairly immediately obvious there.
Yes.
Which is India and China and Asia generally. About 60% of the world's population live in Asia, and that will probably that proportion will probably increase a bit.
Indonesia.
So Africa is just a bit smaller. The whole of Africa together has got slightly less population than India.
Gosh.
1.3 billion.
Mm.
Europe in total 711 million. And the very small population of Russia that is in Asia, this tiny little strip here, that's the Asian part of the Russian population. That is actually spread all the way over, there. So it's tiny. But Russia is, the European part of Russia has quite a lot of people. North America and South America are not as dominant as you might think they were, given, well, the dominance of the United States in terms of world politics and so on. It's a big country, but Mexico is also a big country, as is Brazil. And the whole of North America is only 7.7% of the world's population, and the whole of South America is only 5.6%. So, and Australia and New Zealand, they're tiny. They're down the bottom right corner somewhere. They're hardly show on the data. So basically, what happens in this region here, India, China, the rest of Asia, that will determine lots of things. What they do in terms of dealing with the climate, and what they do in lots of other ways will probably determine the future. Our future, largely, not entirely, but yeah. So that's the first one, really. That gives you the flavour of what's happened in terms of population. Yeah. So I hope that was interesting.
Mm. Yeah.
Japan is surprising too, isn't it?
The what?
I mean,
Sorry?
Japan, obviously a very small island with a very large
I can't see
relatively
Japan.
large.
It's hidden.
It's-
Yes, there you
oh.
are. Can you see Japan? Yes.
Yeah.
Japan's quite, yeah. Japan's big, but it's not, it's not an enormous country, is it? 127
No,
million?
but by if you compare it to how you see it on the map on ordinary
Yeah.
geographic
Yeah.
map,
Very dense population.
very dense, yeah. And the Philippines too, which are
Yeah. And Indonesia, pretty
Mm,
big.
looks really fat, doesn't it, Indonesia? Wow.
Right, I'm going to stop recording now. Can I do that? I don't know. Oh, stop sharing first. I don't know how to do any of that. Can't get any of this up. Now, wait a minute. Let's get rid of that. Oh, right. What's that now? I'll probably press the wrong button now. No, show grid video. How do I get it back big?
Get what back? Get you
Oh.
back.
I've just got a few small pictures at the moment. I can't see the gallery or how to get back to screen share meeting. Here we are. No. Anyway, carry on talking amongst yourselves.
Chunter.
No, I don't want to end meeting. Thank you. I do want to. No. Weird. I don't know how we do that. Oh, here we are. Stop share. That's that. Oh, yeah.
There we
Okay,
go.
well done.
You have to look all around the dial, and I'll stop recording now. There we go. Yes.